Hello, welcome to another edition of Cracking Cryptic. This weekend I thought we'd take a look at a Killer Sudoku because we've not done one for a while. So this is the deadly rated Killer Sudoku from the Times that appeared yesterday. As usual, what I'll do is I'll just fill in some of the obvious cages first in terms of combinations. You see, for example, a 17 cage can only be an 8 and a 9. 30 cage in 4 cells, that can only be 6, 7, 8 and 9. So we can fill in a little bit more there. Let's just flip round the grid and see what we can see. Another 8-9 combination there. There's a 7 in 3 cells, that has to be 1, 2 and 4. If you want to get quick at these, you have to really learn all of these combinations. This 11 cage here, we already have a 2, an 8 and a 4 in this 3x3 cage or box. Therefore the only way of making 11 that hasn't been effectively ruled out by the other entries is with a 5 and a 6. So we can fill that in, just fill in the 3-7 combination here. But one thing we need to bear in mind is that every 3x3 cage or 3x3 box in this Sudoku will add to 45 because it will contain the numbers from 1 to 9 exactly once. If you add up the numbers 1 to 9, you get 45. So let's have a look at that by looking at this box here. You can see we have a 21 cage and a 10 cage, that's 31. So we know these 3 cells are going to sum to 14. We can go a bit further here because this 15 cage is very restricted. So for example, if this is a 3, these 2 cells would have to sum to 12. And if the 3 cells sum to 14, this would have to be a 2. Now similarly, if this is 7, then this is going to be 8, and this is going to have to be 6. So using that, you can see we're actually able to make further progress because this cannot be a 6 because we already have a 6 in the column. So this has to be a 2, and therefore this has to be a 3, and therefore this has to be the 7 down here. In a 10 cage, therefore this has to be a 1 and a 2, in some combination or other. Now we can probably even go a bit further than that. I'll just fill in this 7 down here, that's got to be 1, 2 and 4. You can see that creates a nice triple in row 7 here. We have 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. So what else can I see that's obvious here? There are a few things that we could look at. Let's try and do it in an elegant way. We can make some more progress on this bottom right hand box with arithmetic again. We know this cell here is a 6 or a 7. Now if it's a 6, that means these 3 cells must sum to 24 because we know the whole cage sums to 30. Now if these sum to 24, plus 3 is 27, plus 14 is 41. That would mean this cage, this cell had to be a 4. Similarly, if this was a 7 instead, this would be 23, 26, 40, so this would be a 5. And yet again we're able to use this 11 cage to help us. This can't be a 5, it must therefore be a 4. In which case we said this had to be a 6. Now that being a 6 allows us to rule out lots of things from there, like so. And you can see this has to be 3, 5, 6 in some order, and because of the 3 we already have in column 8, this has to be the 3 here. These 2 cells must be 5 and 6, like so. And there's something nice now about this 16 cage, it's highly restricted. You can see that because of the 4 that's already in it, these 2 cells have to sum to 12. But we already have a 3 and a 4 in the row already. So the only way that this can work is if this is 5 and 7 in some order, because 3 and 9 and 4 and 8 are ruled out. Obviously if this was 4, there would be 2 4s in the cage, and that's why that's not an option. That forces this cell to be a 3, gives us a 5 up here. We have to put in a 3 here now, and a 1. This has to be a 6, this has to be a 5. And you can see we've got to place 2, 8 and 9 now. We've got 8 and 9 in this cell. This has to be obviously 8 and 9 as well. It can't be a 2, therefore this has to be a 2, and this has to be a 7. This can't be an 8, because then this would be a 5, and that would contradict here. So this is going to be a 9, and this is going to be a 4, which allows us to get rid of a 4 here. We can fill in the 9 and the 8 combination into that cell as well, and remove the 9 from this box, and remove the 7 here. So this has to be an 8 now. Making reasonable progress. How long should one of these take you? Deadly rated puzzles, that if you look at the guidance in the paper, it says 55 minutes, normally 56 minutes, something like that for this level of puzzle. I would say if you're an expert solver, it should take you 10 minutes. Something like that. Sometimes you can do them quicker, sometimes they're a little bit slower, but that's that would be the guidance I would suggest is about right. 3, 5 into these 2 cells. And now let's see if we can see something else clever to do now. Just let me scan the grid for a moment. You can actually see there's another of these 30 cages here in 4 cells, so we would actually be able to write in some options for this, like so. And just giving you an example of the power of arithmetic in a puzzle like this, I mean, one thing you could look at doing is actually splitting up this 19 cage. How do you do that? It's worth pausing the video if you can't see how. I'll try and explain it. So, if we look at the first 4 columns of the grid, you can see that lots of the cages in these 4 columns are entirely contained by these 4 columns. And if we draw an imaginary line down the grid here, you can see that only this 19 cage actually breaks that imaginary line. Every other cage is entirely to the left of it. Now, we know that the first 4 columns have got to sum up to 180, because that's 4 lots of 45. So in fact, if we add up all of these cages that appear to the left of our imaginary line, we're going to be able to isolate the value of these 2 cells, because that's going to be the difference between 180 and the sum of all these cages. So let's just do that now. So you've got 18, 40, 54, 84, 96, 115, 1, 2, 3, 1, 3, 4, 3, 4, 1, 6, 4, 1, 7, 7. So in fact, these 2 cells, believe it or not, have to sum up to 3 and have to be 1 and 2, like that. Now that's brilliant now, because now this has to be 7 and a 9, because these 2 would have to add to 16. Look at that, that resolves this ambiguity down here. So now this will have to be a 7 and this will have to be a 5. And now we can take this even further, because if we now look at the central column of the grid, we have 16 here, plus 10 is 26, plus 5 is 31. So we know these 3 cells have to sum to 14. And that means that there are very few options here. In particular, you can see that if this isn't a 4, this cell cannot be filled, because we couldn't put an 11 in one cell. So this has to be a 4. And once that's a 4, this has to be an 8 or a 9, like that. Now, this can't be a 9, it's going to have to be an 8. Therefore, this is going to be a 2, and this is going to be a 1. And therefore, this is 6, 1, 3 in some order. Let's just write that in for the sake of good order. Oops, software's gone crazy. 6, like that. And again, let's try and use arithmetic now on this row. So you can see because of this 8, these 3 cells here sum to 11. Well, 11 plus 13 is 24, plus 7 is 31. So again, we've got the same thing here. These 3 cells have got to sum to 14. And therefore one of them, one of these 2 cells must be a 4. Therefore this can't be a 4, we can take that 4 out. And this time obviously 4 and 2 isn't possible, because if this was 4 and 2, that would clash with this cell, would have to be an 8 again, we'd have 2 8s. So in fact we know these 2 are going to have to be 4 and 1, therefore this will have to be the 2. And this will be a 9. Now these 2 sum to 17, so these 2 have to sum to 6 without using the number 5. So the only way that's possible is if these are 2 and 4, and because of this 2 here, that forces the 2 and the 4 to be in this particular order. Okay. And interestingly enough now, we can see that we've got to place the numbers 1, 3, 6 and 7 into these 4 cells. But this can't be a lot of those numbers. It can't be a 1, because then this would be an 11. It can't be a 3, because we already have a 3 here. And it can't be a 6, because if it was a 6, this would be a 6 as well. You can't have 2 6s in the same cage. So in fact, that has to be a 7. That's going to be a 6, that's going to be a 1, and that's going to be a 3. And that's going to be a 5. And you can see that once you get a little bit of a grip on these puzzles, they can quickly become very tractable. Let's just tidy up some of the notation here. You can now see we've got an 8, 9 double here, so this is going to have to be a 4. That's a 5 and that's a 6 because of this 5 here. We can isolate the value of this cell because this is a 6. These 3 cells are going to sum to 24. 24 plus 9 is 33. Plus 11 is 44, therefore this has to be a 1, which we could have actually seen a different way too. We have a 1 here and a 1 here, so by simple Sudoku rules, this would have to be a 1, because neither of these cells can be a 1. Now let's look at these 2 cells. Well, we've got 5 in these 2, so these 2 have to add to 17. That's only possible if they're 8 and 9. So we can put that in. That forces this to be an 8, this to be a 9, and this to be a 7. You can now see this is 2, 3, 6 in some order. Well, that has to be a 6 actually. That's going to be a 2, and that's going to be a 3. Again, all by simple Sudoku rules. Nothing intelligent about what I've done there. So now 1, 2 and 7 to place in this column to complete it, and 4 and 6 is forced into these 2 boxes here. Now what are we left with? We're left with 1, 2, 4 into these. So 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4. You can now see that we have a 1, 2, 4 triple down here. Well, this definitely can't be a 1, in fact that has to be a 6 because of the 10 cage. What are we left with? 3, 5, 8 down here. Now, going all the way back to the start, we worked out these 2 have to sum to 12, and we now have a 9 and an 8 here. So these are going to have to be 5 and 7, and because of this 7 and this 5, that's going to have to be resolved in that direction, which completes the 7 and the 9 down here. Resolve this 1 and the 2 from what we did earlier, and this 4 and this 1, and in fact this 9 and 8. So we're just in the tidying up stages now. Now here's an interesting little, just note this, you couldn't have this in a normal Sudoku. So you've got 4, 6 here and 4, 6 here. Now if you had this in a normal Sudoku, that would mean that the puzzle had 2 solutions, because the 4 and the 6 could be either way round, and you could simply reverse the order of them and create another solution to the puzzle. But that logic doesn't hold true in a killer, because the killer, these cage totals will force one of these to be one of these numbers to resolve, and that will in turn resolve the other, which will resolve these 2. So we don't have to worry at this stage about the fact that we have a 4, 6 and a 4, 6 here. Now if we just take a quick moment, imagine this was a 4, these two cells would have to add to 6. That's impossible now because we already have a 2 in the 3x3 box and we have a 5. And the only way of making 6 in 2 cells would be with a 2-4 combination or a 1-5 combination, both impossible. So we can immediately see that's how that's going to resolve itself, like this. That's going to be 6 and 4, these have to be 3 and 1. 8 and 9 into these two boxes, that's got to be that way round. What does that mean? That's going to be 3, that's going to be 5, that forces the 5 up here. What else? We can force the 9 and the 7 to resolve themselves. This has to be a 2. 7, 1, 7, that's going to be a 4 then, that's going to be a 1, that's going to be a 2. That's going to be a 1, 3, and this is going to be an 8. So I hope this was a useful run through. It's quite nice to do these killers from time to time. If you enjoyed the logic here, do watch more of the videos. We try and release 4 or 5 every week, either doing cryptic crosswords or various forms of hard Sudoku puzzles. And do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.